His eyes never blinked as he delivered the message. Mr. Peterson's pocket watch will stop tomorrow at 3:17 p.m. 3 days later, his own time will run out. You won't believe what happened next. Watch until the end. My name is Dr. William Bennett. In 1924, I was a 38-year-old psychiatrist at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore, still struggling to establish my reputation after the war. My specialty was childhood psychological disorders, a field that was just beginning to be taken seriously in medical circles. It was this specialization that led Mrs. Hayes to my office on a crisp October morning, her 11-year-old son, Oliver, in tow. The boy was small for his age, with a pallor that suggested he spent little time outdoors. His most striking feature was his eyes, pale blue, almost gray, with a penetrating quality that seemed to look through rather than at you. He wore a newsboy cap and suspenders, typical attire for a working-class child in East Baltimore, yet there was nothing typical about his demeanor. He sat perfectly still, hands folded in his lap, while his mother nervously explained the reason for their visit. It started about 6 months ago, Dr. Bennett, Mrs. Hayes said, her worn hands fidgeting with her handbag. Just after his 11th birthday, the dreams came first, then the predictions. Predictions? I asked, keeping my tone neutral despite my skepticism. I'd seen many cases of children with elaborate fantasies, especially those seeking attention or suffering from neglect. Tell him, Oliver, his mother urged. Tell the doctor what you told Mr. Peterson last week. The boy raised his eyes to meet mine. When he spoke, his voice was soft but clear, with a peculiar cadence, as if he were reciting something memorized. I saw Mr. Peterson's pocket watch stopping at 3:17. The hands froze and wouldn't move again. 3 days later, I saw his own time running out. His chair at the dinner table will be empty. Mrs. Hayes leaned forward. Mr. Peterson is our neighbor doctor. Oliver told him this last Tuesday. On Friday, Mr. Peterson's prized pocket watch, a family heirloom he's carried for 20 years, stopped at exactly 3:17 p.m. He brought it to Oliver to show him, thinking it was some kind of prank. He was white as a sheet. And 3 days later, I asked, already anticipating some vague coincidence that had been exaggerated through gossip and suggestion. That would be tomorrow, Mrs. Hayes whispered. That's why we're here. It's not the first time, Doctor. Oliver's predictions, they've been coming true, all of them. I glanced at the boy, expecting to see some sign of satisfaction or mischief, the telltale markers of a child enjoying an elaborate deception. Instead, I saw only solemnity and what appeared to be genuine distress. I don't want to see these things, Oliver said quietly. I don't want to know when bad things will happen, but the dreams come anyway. I spent the next hour questioning Oliver about his predictions, his dreams, his daily life. He was the only child of a widowed mother, his father having died in the Great War. They lived modestly in a row house in East Baltimore, where Mrs. Hayes took in sewing and laundry to make ends meet. Oliver attended public school, had a few friends, and by all accounts was an intelligent but unremarkable student. The dreams, he explained, came without warning, vivid, detailed visions that felt more real than reality itself. Sometimes they were straightforward. Rain on a sunny day predicted a neighbor's dog running away, a fire in a trash can on North Avenue. Other times they were symbolic. A clock stopping before a person faced misfortune, birds flying south before someone moved away, a single shoe washed up on the harbor's edge before a sailor faced trouble. How long have the predictions been coming true? I asked Mrs. Hayes. Almost all of them. For 6 months now, she replied. At first, they were small things. The weather, lost items found, unexpected visitors. We thought it was just coincidence or good guessing. But then what? He predicted Mr. Garfield's stroke 2 weeks before it happened. Said he saw darkness falling over half of Mr. Garfield's face. No one could have known. I made extensive notes, maintaining a professional demeanor despite my internal skepticism. Medical literature documented cases of apparent precognition, but most could be explained by probability, suggestion, or carefully crafted deception. Children, especially intelligent ones like Oliver, were remarkably adept at reading subtle cues in their environment and making logical inferences that seemed supernatural to less observant adults. "Has Oliver been examined by other doctors?" I asked. Our family physician, Dr. Thornton, found nothing physically wrong. He suggested Oliver might be troubled in his mind. Mrs. Hayes lowered her voice on these last words. "But Oliver isn't crazy, Doctor. He's a good boy. Something's happening to him that we don't understand." I scheduled another appointment for the following week, recommending that Mrs. Hayes keep a detailed journal of Oliver's predictions and their outcomes. As they were leaving, Oliver turned back to me. "Your telephone will ring at 2:30 this afternoon," he said matter-of-factly. "It's about your sister in Philadelphia. She needs you." I hadn't mentioned having a sister, let alone one in Philadelphia. Before I could respond, Mrs. Hayes gently ushered him out, offering an apologetic glance over her shoulder. At precisely 2:30 that afternoon, my telephone rang. It was my brother-in-law calling from Philadelphia. My sister had fallen ill with pneumonia and was asking for me. I sat at my desk for a long time after that call, staring at the notes I'd taken during Oliver's session. The rational part of my mind scrambled for explanations. The boy had overheard gossip about my family, perhaps from hospital staff who knew my sister lived in Philadelphia, or it was simply an extraordinary coincidence. Yet another part of me, a part I'd trained myself to suppress through years of scientific education, whispered that I had just encountered something that defied conventional explanation. 2 days later, I received a telephone call from a distraught Mrs. Hayes. Mr. Peterson, their neighbor, had collapsed that morning while working at the shipyard. By the time the doctor arrived, there was nothing to be done. His heart had simply stopped. The empty chair at the dinner table, just as Oliver had seen. I arranged to visit the Hayes home that same afternoon. Their modest row house was immaculately kept, with simple furnishings and carefully mended curtains that spoke of pride despite limited means. Oliver sat in the small parlor, looking even paler than before, his eyes hollow with exhaustion. "He hasn't slept properly since it happened," Mrs. Hayes explained in a hushed voice. "He blames himself." "Oliver," I said gently, sitting across from him, "I'd like to talk about Mr. Peterson." The boy looked up, his unusual eyes meeting mine. I should have said more, been clearer. Maybe he could have seen a doctor or stayed home from work. "Do you believe you caused what happened to Mr. Peterson?" I asked. "No," he replied after a thoughtful pause. "I just see what's coming, like shadows cast backward from things that haven't happened yet. But now people are afraid of me. They cross the street when they see me coming. Mrs. Peterson screamed when Mother tried to offer condolences." Mrs. Hayes wiped a tear from her cheek. "Oh, the neighbors are talking, Doctor, saying Oliver is unnatural. Reverend Simmons has even visited, suggesting the boy's gift might not come from God." I understood their concern. Baltimore in 1924 was modern in many ways, but superstition still held sway in working-class neighborhoods. A child who predicted misfortune could quickly become a scapegoat, especially when grief and fear clouded rational thought. "Oliver needs to be studied, Mrs. Hayes, not by the church, but by science. With your permission, I'd like him to visit my office 3 times a week. We'll document his predictions, explore his dreams, and perhaps understand the source of his unusual ability. And you? Have you ever had a dream that seemed to predict the future? Tell us in the comments. Over the next few weeks, Oliver Hayes became the most fascinating case of my career. 3 times weekly, he visited my office at Johns Hopkins, where I conducted a variety of tests and interviews. I documented each of his predictions meticulously, noting the date, specific details, and subsequent verification. The results were extraordinary. During our first month of sessions, Oliver made 17 distinct predictions. 15 occurred exactly as he described, 1 was partially accurate, and only 1 failed to materialize. The predictions ranged from trivial, a sudden downpour during a Hopkins football game, to the eerily specific, such as a fire breaking out in a bakery on Eastern Avenue, which happened 3 days after Oliver dreamed of bread turning to ash. Most unsettling were his predictions involving people's welfare. Oliver never explicitly foretold illness or accidents. Instead, he spoke in metaphors that became unmistakable in retrospect. Mrs. Collins' "canary will stop singing" preceded the elderly woman's stroke. The lighthouse beam will dim came before Captain Marshall's sudden retirement due to failing eyesight. "And how do these visions come to you, Oliver?" I asked during our 12th session, after he had correctly predicted a minor train derailment outside the city. The boy sat in his usual chair, hands folded neatly in his lap. "It's always while I'm sleeping, Dr. Bennett. The dreams feel different from regular ones, brighter, clearer. I'm not in them. I'm watching them like at the moving pictures. When I wake up, they stay with me instead of fading away." "And you have no control over what you see?" "None," he replied, his voice tinged with frustration. "I never see happy things coming, only warnings." This pattern troubled me. Why did Oliver's gift, if indeed it was a gift, focus exclusively on negative events? Was it possible that his subconscious mind was filtering information, prioritizing potential dangers as a form of psychological self-protection? My colleagues at Johns Hopkins were divided on Oliver's case. Dr. Harrison, a neurologist, suggested temporal lobe epilepsy might explain the boy's experiences. Dr. Pearson, who had studied with Jung in Switzerland, proposed that Oliver possessed an unusually developed intuition that allowed him to perceive the collective unconscious. Others dismissed the whole phenomenon as an elaborate hoax or the product of mass suggestion. Only I had witnessed the full range of Oliver's predictions, noted their accuracy, and looked into the boy's eyes as he described his dreams. Whatever was happening defied simple explanation. One afternoon, as our session concluded, Oliver grew suddenly still. His pale eyes took on that distant quality I'd come to recognize as a prelude to a new prediction. "Dr. Bennett," he said softly, "you should check the brakes on your automobile before driving home tonight. I saw your car rolling down Hill Street with no one inside it." I thanked him, trying to mask my unease. Sure enough, when my mechanic inspected my Ford that evening, he discovered a critical flaw in the brake line that would likely have failed on the steep incline of Hill Street, my usual route home. That night, I wrote in my journal, "The boy has saved me from potential harm. My scientific skepticism is becoming increasingly difficult to maintain." As word of Oliver's abilities spread through East Baltimore, public reaction followed a disturbing but predictable pattern. A few people sought him out, hoping to learn their futures. Others avoided the Hayes household entirely. Mrs. Peterson had taken to crossing herself whenever Oliver passed by. Anonymous letters arrived, some accusing the boy of witchcraft, others begging for predictions about sick relatives or financial investments. Mrs. Hayes was at her wit's end. "He's just a child, Dr. Bennett," she told me during a private conversation. "He should be playing with friends, not bearing this burden." And now the school principal has suggested Oliver take a leave of absence, says he's disrupting the other children's education. I was outraged, but unsurprised. Fear often masquerades as moral concern, especially when confronted with the inexplicable. Bring him to my office every day, I decided. I'll arrange for a tutor. The hospital board has approved further study of Oliver's case. They're quite intrigued, actually. What I didn't tell Mrs. Hayes was that several board members viewed Oliver as a potential asset. If the boy could predict illnesses or accidents, perhaps he could help the hospital prevent them. I found this notion ethically questionable, but kept my reservations to myself. For now, my priority was keeping Oliver safe and continuing my research. It was during this period that I began investigating Oliver's family history, searching for clues to his unusual ability. Mrs. Hayes initially seemed reluctant to discuss her late husband's family, but eventually revealed a significant detail. Oliver's paternal grandfather had possessed a similar gift. Thomas Hayes was known in his village in Ireland as the Seer of Ballycroy, she explained. My husband rarely spoke of it. It embarrassed him. But according to family stories, the old man could predict storms, crop failures, even when a woman was carrying twins before her condition was known. This revelation suggested a hereditary component to Oliver's ability, which both fascinated and troubled me. If the gift had genetic origins, had we stumbled upon an inherited trait previously unknown to science? One morning in late November, I arrived at my office to find Oliver and his mother already waiting, though their appointment wasn't until afternoon. The boy's face was drawn, his eyes ringed with shadows. He's had another dream, Doctor, Mrs. Hayes said without preamble. A big one. He hasn't slept since. I ushered them inside and turned to Oliver. Tell me. I saw the theater, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The Royal Theater on Pennsylvania Avenue. There were so many people inside, watching a show. Then I saw the ceiling beams turning black, like they were being painted with darkness, and then they broke. The Royal Theater was Baltimore's newest entertainment venue, having opened just months earlier. It seated nearly 1,000 people and hosted vaudeville acts, moving pictures and musical performances. Oliver, when did you see this happening? Saturday night, during the evening show. Today was Wednesday. If Oliver's vision proved accurate, we had 3 days to prevent potential disaster. I faced an ethical dilemma that no medical school had prepared me for. If I alerted authorities based solely on a child's dream, I risked professional ridicule and possibly legal repercussions for causing public panic. If I remained silent and tragedy struck, how could I live with myself? We need to verify this, I told Mrs. Hayes. I'll make inquiries about the building's construction, inspection records, anything that might substantiate a structural concern. That afternoon, I telephoned a former patient who worked in the city's building department. Under the guise of historical research, I requested information about the Royal Theatre's construction. What he told me sent a chill down my spine. Funny you should ask about that place, Doc. We've had complaints about the contractor who did the ceiling work. Cut corners on several other projects. Nothing proven, but rumors persist. I asked if any inspections were scheduled. Not until next month. Why the interest? I fabricated a story about a patient with architectural interests, thanked him, and hung up. Then I sat at my desk for a long time, contemplating my next move. That evening, I visited the Royal Theatre myself. The marquee advertised grand spectacular vaudeville show, Saturday night only. I purchased a ticket for the current evening's performance and went inside, my eyes drawn immediately to the ornate ceiling. The elaborate plasterwork and heavy wooden beams showed no visible signs of stress or danger, but I was a doctor, not an engineer. During the show, I paid more attention to the ceiling than the performers. Was that a hairline crack near the central chandelier? Did that beam seem to sag slightly? Or was I seeing problems because I expected to find them? As the audience applauded the final act, I made my decision. Oliver Hayes had proven his ability too many times for me to ignore this warning. Even if I risked my professional reputation, I could not remain silent. The next morning, I sent telegrams to the theater owner, the city building inspector, and the Baltimore Sun newspaper. Each contained the same message: urgent structural concerns regarding Royal Theatre ceiling. Immediate inspection recommended before Saturday performance. I signed my name and credentials to each, knowing I was potentially ending my career at Johns Hopkins. Then I waited. And you, would you risk your reputation to warn others based on a premonition? Tell us in the comments. The response to my telegrams was swift and unexpected. By Thursday afternoon, the theater owner, one Mr. Vincent Blackwood, appeared at my office unannounced, his face flushed with anger. "What is the meaning of this, Dr. Bennett?" he demanded, waving my telegram. "You've sent this alarmist message to the building inspector and the newspaper. On what grounds?" I invited him to sit, maintaining my professional composure despite his hostility. "I have reason to believe there may be structural issues with your theater's ceiling. I thought it prudent to suggest an inspection before Saturday's performance." "Reason to believe," he scoffed. "Are you an architect now? An engineer? The Royal was inspected before opening. Everything is up to code." I chose my next words carefully. "Mr. Blackwood, I understand your concern, but wouldn't a simple inspection be worth the peace of mind? If I'm wrong, you can proceed with your show knowing everything is safe. And if the inspector finds nothing wrong, will you publicly retract your claims? Pay for the lost revenue from postponing my biggest show of the season?" His eyes narrowed. Or perhaps you'd like to share the real source of your concerns." The question hung in the air between us. I couldn't reveal that my warning was based on the dream of an 11-year-old boy with an uncanny gift for prediction. Blackwood would dismiss it outright, perhaps even use it against me. "My sources must remain confidential," I said finally. "But I assure you, I wouldn't have sent those telegrams without compelling reason." Blackwood stood, straightening his expensive suit. "The building inspector called me this morning. He's coming tomorrow, thanks to your meddling. When he finds nothing wrong, and he won't, I'll expect a formal apology. And Dr. Bennett, the board at Johns Hopkins might be interested to know one of their psychiatrists is sending alarmist messages based on confidential sources." After he left, I sat at my desk, feeling the weight of potential consequences. If the inspection revealed nothing, my credibility would be severely damaged. If the performance was cancelled based on my warning and nothing happened, I could face legal action for defamation. Yet the alternative, ignoring Oliver's vision and risking lives, was unthinkable. Friday morning brought Oliver and his mother to my office for our regular session. The boy looked slightly better, though still tired. "Have you had any more dreams about the theater?" I asked him. He shook his head. "No, sir. Just the same one, over and over. The building inspector is examining the theater today," I told them. "If he finds anything concerning, the performance may be postponed." Mrs. Hayes reached across and squeezed my hand, an unusual gesture given the formal doctor-patient relationship of the era. "Thank you for believing him, Dr. Bennett. Few others would have." Oliver studied my face with those penetrating eyes. "And they'll find something," he said simply, "but it won't be enough." His words troubled me deeply. What did he mean? That the inspection would discover a problem but underestimate its severity? Or that they would find one issue while missing another? I received my answer that afternoon. The building inspector, a Mr. Harold Fleming, telephoned my office. "Dr. Bennett, Fleming here, just finished at the Royal Theatre. Thought you'd want to know we found some substandard bracing on 2 ceiling beams. Nothing catastrophic, but enough to warrant repair before their next major event. My relief was palpable. So Saturday's performance will be postponed. A pause. Well, that's the thing. Blackwood's raising hell about it. Says he's got performers contracted, tickets sold out. He's promised to have a crew reinforce those beams first thing tomorrow morning. If they complete the work to my satisfaction, I'll have to clear the show. But can proper repairs be completed in a single day? It's not ideal, Fleming admitted, but legally, my hands are tied. If they meet minimum safety requirements, I can't shut them down over what's essentially a maintenance issue. After hanging up, I immediately telephoned Blackwood at the theater. His secretary informed me he was unavailable. I left an urgent message, stressing that postponement was the only prudent course, regardless of hasty repairs. I doubted he would return my call. That evening, unable to concentrate on anything else, I drove to the Hayes residence. They lived in a narrow row house, identical to dozens of others on their street, distinguished only by the immaculate white curtains in the windows and the carefully tended geraniums on the front step. Mrs. Hayes invited me into their modest parlor, surprise evident on her face at my unannounced visit. Oliver sat at a small desk in the corner, working on schoolwork his mother had obtained from his teacher. They found weakened ceiling beams, I told them without preamble. But Blackwood intends to make quick repairs and proceed with tomorrow's show. Oliver looked up from his arithmetic. It won't be enough, he repeated, his voice soft but certain. What exactly did you see in your dream, Oliver? I need every detail. The boy closed his book and turned to face me fully. I saw the ceiling beams turning black, like shadow was spreading through the wood from the inside out. Then they snapped, not all at once, but one after another. People were screaming, trying to run. The chandelier. He hesitated. Go on, I encouraged gently. The main chandelier fell. That's when I always wake up. Mrs. Hayes made a small sound of distress. Doctor, can't you do more to stop this? I ran a hand through my hair, weighing options. I've warned the theater owner, the building inspector, even the newspaper. Short of standing outside the theater tomorrow night warning people away, which would likely result in my arrest, I'm not sure what else I can do officially. An idea formed as I spoke the words. It was unorthodox, possibly career-ending, but it might work. Mrs. Hayes, would you and Oliver be willing to come with me to the theater tomorrow evening, before the show begins? She looked uncertain. What do you have in mind? People may dismiss my warnings as those of an overzealous doctor, but if they could hear directly from Oliver. I turned to the boy. And would you be willing to tell your dream to Mr. Blackwood, to describe exactly what you've seen? Oliver paled slightly but nodded. If it will help save people. It might, I said, though privately I wondered if Blackwood would be any more receptive to a child's vision than to my vague warnings. But there's risk involved. People already whisper about Oliver's abilities. This would put him in the public eye even more. Mrs. Hayes straightened her shoulders. We'll do it. Better whispers than what would happen if that ceiling collapses. Saturday arrived with an unusual warm spell for late November. By afternoon, crowds were already gathering outside the Royal Theatre for the evening's grand spectacular. Posters advertised a famous magician, acrobats from Europe, and a renowned opera singer. No wonder the show had sold out. At 5:30 p.m., 2 hours before curtain, I parked my Ford a block from the theater. Mrs. Hayes and Oliver sat silently beside me, the boy dressed in his Sunday best, his cap pulled low over his eyes. Remember, I told them as we walked toward the theater's side entrance, let me do the initial talking. If Blackwood agrees to listen, Oliver, that's when you'll share your dream. The stage door was propped open, stagehands and performers bustling in and out with equipment and costumes. I approached a harried-looking man with a clipboard who appeared to be supervising. "Excuse me, we need to speak with Mr. Blackwood urgently. It's about the ceiling repairs." The man barely glanced at us. "Blackwood's in his office. Repairs are finished. Inspector signed off an hour ago. Show goes on. Nevertheless, we must speak with him." Perhaps something in my tone conveyed the gravity of the situation, or perhaps he simply wanted to pass the problem to his boss. Either way, he pointed us toward a corridor. "Last door on the right, but he won't be happy about the interruption." Blackwood's office was opulent compared to the utilitarian backstage area. Oriental carpet, mahogany desk, leather-bound books lining shelves that I suspected were more for show than reading. The theater owner himself sat behind the desk, reviewing paperwork. He looked up with annoyance that quickly turned to anger when he recognized me. "Dr. Bennett, I might have known you'd try some last-minute interference. The repairs are complete. The inspector has approved, and the show begins in less than 2 hours. Whatever you have to say, I'm not interested." "Mr. Blackwood, please. This is Mrs. Hayes and her son, Oliver. They have information critical to your theater's safety tonight." His eyes narrowed as he took in the working-class woman and the solemn-faced boy. Information from a child. Before I could respond, Oliver stepped forward, removing his cap. "Sir, I've seen what will happen tonight. I've seen it in my dreams, over and over. The ceiling beams will turn black with shadow, then break one after another. The chandelier will fall. People will be hurt. And you, have you ever ignored a warning that you later wished you'd heeded? Tell us in the comments." Blackwood's face flushed with anger. "This is your source, a child's nightmare." He turned to me with contempt. "Dr. Bennett, I expected better from a man of science. Basing structural concerns on a boy's dreams is beyond unprofessional. It's absurd." I had anticipated this reaction, but Oliver's response surprised us all. "Your theater was built by Westmoreland Construction," the boy said quietly. "The same company that built the bridge that collapsed in Harrisburg last year. The foreman who supervised your ceiling work was fired from his previous job for using substandard materials. His name is Frank Hargrove, and he has a scar on his left hand from a childhood accident." The color drained from Blackwood's face. "How could you possibly know those details?" "The same way I know the ceiling will fail tonight," Oliver replied. "I see things, Mr. Blackwood. Things that haven't happened yet, and things hidden from view." The theater owner sat heavily in his chair. These weren't facts Oliver could have guessed or overheard. They were private details about the theater's construction that even I hadn't known. "The repair crew," Blackwood said after a long pause. "They only reinforced the beams the inspector identified, but if there are other weaknesses—" "There are," Oliver confirmed. "The central support where the chandelier hangs, it looks solid from below, but inside, it's compromised." Blackwood reached for his telephone. "I'm calling the inspector back." "And the repair crew." He glanced at the clock on his wall. "But people are already lining up outside. Nearly 1,000 tickets sold." "Postpone the show," I urged. "Refund the tickets if necessary." "Easy for you to say, Doctor. This could bankrupt me." He ran a hand through his hair, conflict evident on his face. Finally, he made his decision. "I'll have the area beneath the chandelier blocked off. We'll seat people away from the center. That should minimize any risk while we conduct a more thorough inspection tomorrow." "That's not enough," Oliver insisted, his small voice suddenly forceful. "The whole ceiling is at risk." "Please, sir," Blackwood's expression hardened. "I've conceded to checking the chandelier support and roping off the central seating. That's all. Now, I have a show to prepare for, and you three need to leave." He stood, conversation clearly over. As we were ushered out, I felt a deep sense of failure. We had convinced Blackwood to take some precautions, but not enough, not nearly enough. Outside, the evening air had turned chilly. and crowds of well-dressed theatergoers formed a line around the block. Families, couples, groups of friends, all eagerly awaiting an evening of entertainment, unaware of the danger Oliver had foreseen. "We can't let this happen," Mrs. Hayes said, watching the crowd with growing distress. "All these people." An idea struck me. The newspaper. My telegram went to the editor at the Baltimore Sun. Perhaps they took it seriously enough to send a reporter. We hurried to a nearby telephone booth where I placed a call to the newspaper office. After several transfers, I reached a junior reporter named Michael Collins, who confirmed he'd been assigned to follow up on my telegram. "I'm outside the theater now," he told me. Just gathering background for a small piece about the inspection. Nothing much to report since the inspector cleared the show." "Mr. Collins, I'm Dr. William Bennett, the one who sent the telegram. I have critical new information about the theater's safety. Can you meet us immediately?" 10 minutes later, Collins joined us in a small diner across from the theater. He was younger than I expected, perhaps in his mid-20s, with the eager expression of someone hoping for his big break. I introduced Oliver and explained the situation, the boy's history of accurate predictions, the dream about the theater ceiling, and Blackwood's limited response to our warning. Collins looked skeptical, but intrigued. "You're suggesting I write a story based on a child's premonition?" "I'm suggesting you might prevent a tragedy," I replied. "Look into Westmoreland Construction's history. Verify what Oliver said about the Harrisburg Bridge collapse and the foreman, Frank Hargrove. That should convince you he knows things he couldn't possibly know through ordinary means." The reporter studied Oliver thoughtfully. The editor would never print speculative warnings based on dreams, but if I could verify these construction concerns independently. He stood abruptly. "Wait here." Collins disappeared for nearly 30 minutes. When he returned, his expression had changed from skepticism to urgency. I telephoned our Harrisburg correspondent. Westmoreland Construction did indeed build the bridge that collapsed there. 14 people were injured. And I found a stagehand who confirmed that the foreman, Hargrove, has a distinctive scar on his left hand. He turned to Oliver with newfound respect. "How did you know these things?" "I just see them," Oliver said simply, "like pictures in my mind." Collins checked his watch. "The show starts in 20 minutes. Not enough time for a newspaper story, but perhaps—" He paused, thinking rapidly. "I know several police officers. If I can convince them there's a credible threat to public safety, they might delay the show pending further inspection." "Please hurry," Mrs. Hayes urged. As Collins rushed off, we waited anxiously outside the theater. The crowd had thinned as people took their seats inside. Ushers collected tickets at the ornate front doors, while latecomers hurried up the steps. Oliver suddenly gripped my arm. "It's starting," he whispered, his face pale, "and I can feel it." Before I could respond, 2 police automobiles pulled up to the curb, lights flashing. Collins emerged from one door, accompanied by a uniformed officer. From the other stepped a man in plain clothes who carried himself with authority, a detective, judging by his demeanor. "And that's Detective Harrington," Collins explained breathlessly. "He's agreed to investigate based on potential building code violations. They're going to evacuate the theater while they check the chandelier support." "Thank God," Mrs. Hayes murmured. We watched as the officers entered the theater. Minutes later, Blackwood emerged, gesticulating angrily as Detective Harrington spoke firmly to him. Then came the announcement: the evening's performance would be delayed for a safety inspection. The audience began filing out, their expressions a mixture of disappointment and curiosity. Oliver's grip on my arm tightened. "It's not stopping," he whispered. "In my vision, the collapse happens at 7:42. That's 5 minutes from now." I looked at him sharply. "You never mentioned a specific time before." "I didn't remember it until now. It's 7:42, I'm certain." Collins overheard this exchange. Harrington has men checking the chandelier support, but they're still allowing staff to remain inside. The performers, stagehands. Without hesitation, I rushed toward the theater entrance, Collins and the Hayes close behind. A police officer blocked our path. "Sorry, sir. Theater's closed pending inspection. There are still people inside," I insisted. "The ceiling is going to collapse at 7:42, 2 minutes from now." The officer looked skeptical, but Collins stepped forward, showing press credentials. "Detective Harrington knows me. This is urgent. Lives are at stake." Whether it was Collins' press badge or the intensity of our concern, the officer relented, allowing us to enter the lobby. Inside, the Grand Theatre was eerily quiet without its audience. On stage, performers in costume waited in small groups, while technicians and stagehands milled about uncertainly. Above, 2 men examined the ornate chandelier and its supporting structure. Detective Harrington stood in the center aisle, conferring with another officer. I approached quickly. "Detective, you need to clear everyone out immediately. Not just the audience, everyone." He frowned at the interruption. "We're conducting an inspection, Doctor. The situation is under control." "The ceiling will collapse at 7:42, I insisted, pointing to the elegant clock on the theater wall. "That's less than a minute from now." Harrington's expression hardened. "And you know this because—" Before I could answer, a loud creaking sound came from above. All eyes turned upward. A thin fissure had appeared in one of the massive wooden beams. Precisely as Oliver had described, darkness seemed to spread through the wood like a stain. "Everyone out!" "Now!" Harrington bellowed, his skepticism instantly forgotten. The theater erupted into motion. Performers ran from the stage, technicians abandoned their posts, and the men inspecting the chandelier scrambled down their ladder. Harrington and his officers herded everyone toward the exits with practiced efficiency. As the last person cleared the theater doors, the clock struck 7:42. The sound began as a groan, then a sharp crack. From our position in the lobby, we watched in horror as the first ceiling beam splintered. Then another. The magnificent chandelier swayed once, twice, and plummeted to the theater floor below, shattering into thousands of crystal fragments across seats that, moments before, would have held hundreds of patrons. In the stunned silence that followed, Oliver's small voice seemed unnaturally loud, just like in my dream. The following days passed in a whirlwind. The Baltimore Sun ran a front-page story about the miraculous premonition that had saved countless lives. Collins, true to his word, credited an anonymous structural concern rather than exposing Oliver directly, though rumors inevitably spread. Blackwood, faced with irrefutable evidence and potential lawsuits, issued a public statement thanking the vigilant citizens who had insisted on the inspection. Privately, he visited my office to offer a personal apology. "You were right, Doctor," he admitted grudgingly. "If we'd proceeded with that show..." He left the thought unfinished. An official investigation revealed extensive structural problems throughout the theater, not just with the ceiling, but with support columns and foundation elements as well. Westmoreland Construction faced criminal charges for negligence, and the foreman, Hargrove, turned state's evidence, revealing a pattern of cutting corners and falsifying inspections. As for Oliver, his prediction and its dramatic fulfillment changed everything. Instead of being feared and ostracized, he found himself reluctantly celebrated. The Hayes home received countless letters, some from people seeking predictions, others offering thanks, and a few from scientists and researchers requesting to study the boy's abilities. Mrs. Hayes, protective as ever, refused most inquiries. But she did agree to continue our sessions, recognizing that Oliver needed guidance to understand and manage his gift. "I don't want him exploited," she told me firmly. "But I don't want him to fear his ability either. It's saved lives, Dr. Bennett. Perhaps that's why he has it. In the months that followed, Oliver's predictions continued, though we kept them private. His accuracy remained remarkable, but with my help, he learned to interpret his visions more clearly and to communicate warnings in ways that would be heeded rather than dismissed. The scientific community remained divided on Oliver's case. Some dismissed it as coincidence or fraud. Others proposed theories ranging from heightened intuition to quantum entanglement between mind and future events. I documented everything meticulously, building a case study unlike any in medical literature. Oliver Hayes never sought fame or recognition for his gift. As he grew older, his predictions became less frequent but more significant. He lived a quiet life, working as a librarian, using his ability discreetly to help those in need of warning or guidance. And I, William Bennett, evolved from a skeptical psychiatrist into something of a pioneer in what would later be called parapsychology. My papers on Oliver's case eventually gained acceptance, albeit grudging, in certain medical circles. But more importantly, I learned a profound lesson about the limitations of science in the face of the truly extraordinary. Sometimes, the most rational course of action is to accept that not everything can be rationalized, at least not within the boundaries of our current understanding. The universe, I discovered, is far more mysterious than any of us dare imagine, and occasionally it speaks to us through the dreams of a child. If you want to hear more whispers from the darkness, follow this channel. The next story may be closer than you imagine.